assert that coaching is a skill, just like hitting a baseball or driving a stick shift or baking a cake, that, yeah, maybe some people have a greater aptitude to do it or to do it well.
Right.
But pretty much anyone can learn it.
Right. Yes.
Mr. Dean Miles.
Brilliant Miller.
Good to see you.
Yeah. And I've enjoyed, this is our second time being live in studio.
Yes.
And it's different, but I do like it.
I do too. And this Coaches Commonplace podcast that we're doing is all about helping coaches to be more effective, to earn recognition and money, to make a difference in their clients' lives, to enjoy that process, to be the best version of themselves, live their healthiest, happiest, most meaningful life. So that's what I'm here about.
It's such a great goal. It's taken some work for us to distill it down to those key components. But some of the feedback that I've been getting is the timeliness of these topics, especially for the upcoming newer coaches. The margin of error and being able to start over again is just not there. There's just so much noise within the coaching space that when you do start, you want to start well, you want to build that credibility quick, and you need to make money today.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about our goals.
Yeah, me too. Let's start, as we usually do, with our information diet, recognizing humans are infovores.
Yes,
we're constantly consuming. And not just what media or content that you and I have been consuming, but in particular, what is inspiring you?
I like that. It makes me think, so leftovers. You like leftovers?
Not so much.
Not your favorite?
Not so much.
So there's some things that are better.
Yeah, some
I
things.
think. Cold pizza, cold chicken.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's where I want to start, but the second time around, I think chili gets better. What's my point with that? I've been with coaching and coaching as long as I have. There's some things that I read 20 years ago that I'm going and doing it again. And so one of them is Tim Urban, who has a website, a podcast, a blog, I'll get the right word out, of waitbutwhy.com. And one of the articles that he wrote that went viral was around procrastination. And he ended up doing a TED Talk about it. And so this last week, I've gone back and reread that and rewatched that. We're coming up to half point of the year. And I find my clients, we tend to dip at the halfway point. So Wednesdays, it's not our best effort. Halfway of the year, we're tired. We're exhausted. We're transitioning. And I'm a pretty chronic procrastinator. And so being reminded of how do I set myself deadlines that invites the panic monster to help my rational decision maker get back on board. Because I can coast. Coming into the summer, I'll quit and stay. And so to be reminded of deadlines and my ability to procrastinate longer than what's healthy.
Well, I love what you're saying about inviting the panic monster.
Yeah.
Right. And I think about someone I really admire, Buckminster Fuller. He said, don't fight forces, use them. Right. And so you recognize the leverage that you can get on yourself by having the deadline, making the commitment. Right. I love that. And at the same time, I find myself kind of wanting to go into coaching mode right here about self-compassion and recognizing nobody's ever always on. Nobody's ever always anything.
That's a good point.
And there's cycles, right, of activity and then rest and rejuvenation. But anyway, I didn't mean to make this a coaching session, dude.
I need a couch in here. I need to lie down, some tissues. That's a great reminder. It's a great reminder.
Yeah.
So thanks for coaching.
Yeah. So Wait But Why, the TED Talk. I haven't seen that TED Talk.
It's a well worth 12 minutes.
Right on.
And what he talks about what he was surprised by. There's a lot of things in life. There's a lot of things in coaching that have deadlines. So if you're going to be successful in coaching, you will learn to meet those deadlines.
Sure.
But there's other things they don't have deadlines.
Yeah.
Like reading for your own development. There's no deadline in that.
Right.
Your finances, there's no deadline on that. Your physical health.
Yeah.
And so we start doing this. Well, I'll start on Monday.
Yeah. Tomorrow.
It's
always tomorrow.
Always tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's where I've been reminded, what about those things that don't have deadlines? And that's where I can procrastinate to my own peril.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I will share with you a little bit about what I've been consuming that has been interesting, useful, inspiring to me. One is I went and saw a movie in the theater, which I don't do all that often.
Popcorn?
I did get a small popcorn, no butter.
Oh,
I did.
No butter.
And
can we all just boo?
Dean, I've lost 25 pounds since January.
I can see it.
Yeah. So
But it's not the butter. Don't kid yourself. That butter could have brought you joy. Let me go in coaching mode. You're denying yourself.
What else are you denying? Brilliant. Yeah.
That's exactly. All right.
Yeah. So I went to see Air, the Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, the story of Jordan coming to Nike when they only had 17% of the basketball market back in 1985, when the NBA finals were still broadcast on tape delay, and Jordan absolutely didn't want to go to Nike, right? But that whole, not to spoil anything about the film, I think it's fun and worth watching. And incidentally, I think it's kind of interesting that we're in this period where a few retro things are coming back as stories, right? Like the story of Tetris.
Yes.
Which I also watched on an airplane and found fascinating because I was addicted to that as a kid.
Yeah, same.
But watching this, the thing that inspired me about the film were a few things. One was the character Matt Damon played, who basically he was relentless. You know, he had clarity and he just moved forward in trying to sign Jordan, and we know how that has played out. And then later on, when Jordan's mom, who was his advocate, right, and he's a pretty shrewd business person himself, but where ultimately when they agreed to sign with Nike, that she put in the contract at the last minute, insisted that it was in, that he would get a percentage of all Jumpman merchandise, the Air Jordan merchandise. And although it's not public, it's believed that Jordan now earns $400 million of passive income every year from the sale of those. And it was because his mom asked for it, and also because he knew his value. She knew his value and asked for it. And I think as coaches, we often don't ask for, or maybe even demand, what our true value is.
Charles Barkley, I want to say maybe in the last 3 weeks, has gone on the record of what Michael Jordan's mom did for him, Michael Jordan did for Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley had a contract with Nike and was getting, I think, $10 million a year. And Charles asked Michael Jordan, am I missing something? And he's like, you don't need $10 million every year. I mean, you just don't need that. Get it in stock. And Charles said, it changed his financial legacy. Wow. Just that little tidbit.
Yeah.
But enough, I pat ourselves on the back. In one sense, that's what the Commonplace is about, is to inspire and share our stories of what questions did we ask? How are we getting paid what we're getting paid? So what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do differently now that you've had your non-buttered popcorn watching this movie?
Well, what I think about with this is how change, as we know, at one level change is inevitable, but also we can make change. We can make change happen. And when we think of innovation, we tend to think of new technology, right? There was some cool new gadget or something like ChatGPT come along, and clearly that's one form of innovation.
Right.
But there's another form of innovation, which is, and I learned this from the futurist and technologist Nick Webb, who talks about changing a business model, right? And part of the reason Nike was reluctant to do this was they recognized, now every athlete's going to ask for this. It's going to change our model. And so it's this question of what is possible that I'm not present to? What am I not asking that could change not just the results I'm getting, but how I'm going about it, right? And I think about this with Tony Robbins back when he did the infomercials, like in the 80s, the cheesy things that was a huge breakthrough for his business. But that was a result. I've heard him share this at a seminar where he said the operative question for that was, how can I make money even while I sleep? And it was that question, and he kept asking it with intensity and repetition that opened that up. So to me, it's this usefulness of questions, looking at a new way of operating, that kind of thing. And then the last part of that, to kind of go backwards, is I think also choosing to believe that my coaching has a value, greater than maybe others see.
For me, this is an easy addition to the creative brief that we talked about in the last episode, of those types of questions to then add, maybe as a second time around. So now you've gone through your creative brief, you've executed your creative brief, you're looking at the things that you were measuring, and then to add these particular questions to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. You told me you had 2 things. What was the second thing?
The second thing I'm going to bring up when we get into being a great coach.
Ooh, the teaser.
The teaser. Yeah. It's a classic personal growth book.
Okay.
But it will have to do with what we talk about when we talk about helping people be effective coaches, right? And I'll just set this up before we get there about I assert that coaching is a skill, just like hitting a baseball or driving a stick shift or baking a cake, that, yeah, maybe some people have a greater aptitude to do it or to do it well.
Right.
But pretty much anyone can learn it.
Right.
And so what I'll share when we get there that I've learned from this book, Games People Play by Eric Byrne. So that's the setup.
Well, I can't wait.
But before we get there,
yes,
let's talk about something that can help us live a good life.
Okay.
A deeper, more meaningful, happier, healthier life. Okay. This is something I've learned from Marshall Goldsmith, something he challenged me to do. Pretty much everyone that he spends any meaningful time with, he challenges them or invites them to try it as well, something he calls the daily questions. Okay. Before we started recording, you told me that you've been doing the daily questions for almost 10 years now.
That's right.
What are the daily questions? How do you use it? And how is your life different?
Yeah. So it was in the book Triggers, and he and Marshall Goldsmith and Mark Ryder make a really compelling case of to graduate, to accelerate beyond to-do list of, did I eat healthy today? Did I read something today? Did I tell my wife that I love her? From yes and no to, did I do my best today? And they said that making that progress, I'm going to say of maturity, the first discipline is just do it or not do it.
Right.
And then once you get consistent in doing it, now it's to what level of effort are you doing it? And so they challenge me just the right way.
Yeah.
So this is a list that you create. This isn't, they don't give you the list. This is not your mom giving you the list.
This doesn't come from a religion.
That's exactly right. So
not
these
a set
are
of commandments.
No.
Right. Yeah.
Which would be way easier to dismiss them.
Right.
So these are things that I've told myself, Dean Miles, this is what's most important to you.
Yeah.
And so they make the recommendation, have 3 or 4 things. Let me pause. Marshall Goldsmith's been doing this for over 30 years, and he's hired a virtual assistant. They calls him at 9 p.m. every night, 7 days a week, in whatever time zone he happens to be in. So she has his calendar. So if he's in Dubai or Atlanta, Georgia, or California, 9 p.m., his phone rings. I think he's got 15 or so questions, and she will ask him each question. So Marshall's 1 to 9 or 1 to 10. What's your score? So I started off just with some basic ones around creating new content, meditation, interacting with Melanie and each one of the kids. I think I'm well over 5. I think I maybe had 10 or so. And then finances. They were not the right questions, and I struggled. Because it's subjective, but your gut knows, did I do my best today? So then I changed up the questions. So now I've been doing this, like you said, 9 coming up on 10 years, and I hate it. Because I can't justify quitting it. Because this only takes maybe 10 seconds at the end of the day to write these numbers in.
Yeah.
So what am I admitting?
Yeah.
It's not a time thing. It's just I'm not doing what I said was most important to me.
Right.
So I keep doing it. And then I also can't ask clients to do it if I'm not doing it myself.
Sure.
And so Mark Ryder and Marshall's stats were the same as what I'm finding. Most people that I tell this to won't start it. And I actually ask them not to, because I'm like, you're not going to like it and you won't continue to do it. Just one more thing for you to fail at. And then those that do start, less than a third will make it through the first week. It's just so hard to look in the mirror and to confront the fact that you're not doing your best over and over and over and over again. So now over the years, the last 3 years, I will go anywhere between 30 days and 6 months, and I'll pick somebody or somebody will pick me. So many people within our 100 Coaches Network, I've done this with. So with Mark Ryder, the co-author, we did this for the month of February. And so it just gives me someone else to do these things with.
Yeah.
You get new perspectives, different feedback. But it's changed my life. It really, really has.
Yeah.
But I do hate it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the easiest thing, right? It'd be easier not to do it.
Right. Because most of us, if you were to ask me, so Dean, how was your week on things that are important to you? As I reflect back, it went well, brilliant. I think I really knocked it out of the park. And what I'm thinking about is that one day that I did it. And the other 6 days, I didn't even think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. This reminds me of something I once read Gandhi said is happiness is when what we say and what we do are congruent.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. And with something like the daily questions that can be confronting, to start by even identifying what are these things? Is it 30 minutes on the treadmill? Is it, again, like you said, giving my kid a hug and telling them I love them? Is it, writing in my journal? Whatever it is for you that represents, and it can be not just the presence of something like eating, 6 green vegetables, but also did I avoid sugar? Right. There's almost no end to the way we can use this, whether it's like you said, it's scaling. Yes, no. Did I do my best? There's some subjective in there, but there's this whole component of looking at what do I really want? What am I truly committed to?
That's step one.
That can be confronting, right? And then you get into it, and now your actions are either congruent with that or they're not. And then that's information.
I can't tell you how many times it's particularly men, because there's the right answer. And they will say, Dean, what's most important to me is my family. Okay. Pull out your calendar.
Yeah.
Let's look at the last 90 days. Again, no, it's not minute for minute, but just, is there any evidence to support that you've done your best?
Yeah.
How do you define that? What's your leading indicators around that? And how would you even know if that's what's most important? Right. And there's such a disconnect, but that's the right answer.
Yeah.
But it's not congruent.
Yeah. It's not always easy. And what's the saying by Jung about a person will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. It's like delay, procrastinate, lie to ourselves, whatever. Excuse me. But this, the daily questions practice. I'm just thinking if somebody's listening to this, they wanted to try it for themselves, and they've heard about Marshall has someone who calls him, or you've done it with other partners.
Right.
I would just jump to this. I actually would invite people to try this if they're not doing something like it already. Not that we need more to do, but that this can be, I would say, like a clearing. This could be a space in which our highest values and our deepest desires truly show up.
Right.
Right. And then say, and to not make it, like to make the game winnable. Start simple.
Well, I like that.
Start small. Pick these things, 3 to 5 things each day. It can be a few seconds. It doesn't need to be big. And then part of what I love too, which we didn't expressly talk about, is at the end, when you kind of check, yes, no, 0 to 10, whatever, there's no explanation. There's no penance.
That's right.
Right. It's just information. And then you go forward, and it's the next day. So that's my thought.
I like that a lot. And make it winnable. What if Mark Ryder were sitting here? What he would say is, between Marshall and his daughter, both PhDs, they've figured it out. The recipe is it's daily. So my encouragement is don't do this weekly.
Right.
That's going to be your tendency. How about I just do this on Sundays? I'll reflect on the week and I'll give myself a score.
Yeah.
They've done the research behind it. Brilliant. It must be daily.
Yeah.
Because it's those small incremental steps that you start to get that exponential, that compounding type of impact.
Yeah. Well, and that creates momentum in our lives too, exactly right? And there's that saying that what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. So this, like you're saying, consistency.
Over intensity. I think Daniel Pink or Simon Sinek has something about that. You can going to the dentist is probably a wise thing to do. It's pretty intense to the whole system. You could not do that every single day. So the consistency of brushing your teeth. And so somebody asked him, how many times do you have to brush your teeth to get the positive impact? And he's like, I don't know. How many times can I miss and still maintain the positive impact? He's like, I don't know. I just know if you brush your teeth every day for a really long time, it has significant impact on your oral health.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with pick the right 2 to, or you said 3 to 5 things that are winnable.
Yep.
And then do your best. Yeah. And then my favorite part, go to bed.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, there's no rollover momentum or rollover minutes. So the score starts over again. So if you had a day that you didn't do your best, you do it the next day. But I also like the flexibility. So let's think about physical stuff. If on a day like today, man, my schedule's tight today. If I did 10 push-ups today, knowing what my calendar is, that could be a best effort today.
Sure.
Tomorrow, my schedule's not nearly as full. Like you and I are playing golf. And if I only did 10 push-ups, that's probably a 3 that day.
Right.
So it allows for the flexibility of life.
Yep. Which we're going to bet push-ups too, by the way. So you're going to have a chance to do even more push-ups. I don't bet money, but I bet push-ups. So,
well, we'll arm wrestle for this decision to see where this goes. This is fun. I like that. Yeah.
Well, let's transition to something that can help people listening, people watching, to be great coaches.
Okay. Love it.
Feels like a grand ambition, but I believe it's possible. I'm committed that it's possible. And as I said, it's a skill. It's not just a talent. It's not just a lucky few or whatever, or some other kind of person, but it's a possibility for each of us. And of course, desire is, I think, a foundation for that. But people who are listening to this, I think, have that desire. But what I would present for our discussion, our exploration in this conversation is commitment. It's about commitment. And here's the thing. If you having a conversation with your coaching client and they're just telling you how their week's been, they're sharing with you their problems, their drama, the stories, right? Like that's probably a conversation like they have with their friends or maybe their spouse. A bartender, right? Something like that. Yeah. But they can have that conversation with a lot of people. But the thing is, I think there are certain conversations that are unique, if not rare, to coaches, right? So that what that suggests to me is that as coaches, we have a privilege and I think a responsibility to make sure that our conversations have a certain quality, like a certain tenor that just a BS session with a friend over coffee doesn't have, right? And this is a little bit of a tangent on this point, but one thing when I train coaches, I'll say, look, if you can feel paradoxical because it's not comfortable to interrupt somebody, right? But if you understand this person has come to you, they've given you permission to coach them, they've asked you to coach them, interrupting can actually be one of the most powerful things you can do. And if you're allowing someone to just share that same sad story, the sob story, you're actually not serving them, right? But that's not the point I wanted to make in this. The point I wanted to make was about commitment.
Yes.
Right? And this reminds me when I learned to podcast. I'm still learning, right? But when I studied the art of interviewing, one of the things that I read was that a great interview sounds like a conversation. To a listener, it'll sound like a conversation, but it's not a conversation.
Right.
Right? There's an intention. There's a path, right? There's some preparation for it. There's the give and take, the back and forth. That's deliberate, right? But as you're hearing it, you wouldn't know, like, there was some work put in necessarily. And now this thing sounds effortless. Coaching, I think, is the same way, right?
I agree with that. What you're making me thinking about is it's a commitment to, I think one commitment is just knowing different processes. So one of them, the sob, or the person sharing their story, their sad story, that's process coaching. And so to be committed to in that moment, keep them going. Say more. What else? Tell me the sadder version of that story. And what else is there? And you take them down and down and down and down and down and down. Way further than the bartender's going to take them. Way further than the spouse is going to take them. You're taking them through this process and you're trusting the process that they will then get to the point they're going to discover something in this sad story that they've never experienced before. And then they come into this resonance and they come back out with some new insight. Yeah. But you're committed to you're doing something on purpose. Same thing with your interview style.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And when I hear you describe it that way, what I tend to think is, this is my opinion, right? That as long as that's in service to the creation of something.
That's right.
The realization of something, it's forward looking, right? Because I don't think it's just down or back. Like, tell me more and what was your childhood and how do you feel about all that? I mean, maybe there's a time and place for that in coaching, In fact, I'm sure there is.
Right.
But I tend to think that's more the realm of therapy, where I think effective coaching is creative and forward-looking.
That's a great distinction. So it's a great distinction. So let's keep pulling that apart. So in the sad story, as a coach, I'm listening for, and that made me feel distant. Pause, right? There's an interruption. Let's talk about being distant. Where else do you feel distant? And that's where you go and explore all the four corners on a emotion.
Yeah.
So it's less of, I was potty trained too early,
Right.
and I'm more of just going deep into an emotion, a feeling that you had,
Yeah.
and where else does that show up for you?
Yeah.
And then where's the saboteur in this?
Right.
And then, now what do you want to do with it?
Right.
But it's a commitment to, you have to know the craft
Right.
of what you're doing to take someone further than they naturally would go on their own.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And to me, also the whole thing about like, well, what would you rather be? What is it that you truly want? What's the real issue here?
Yeah, what's the lie?
Right? Because we can
My
do
favorite question.
the lie. What's the lie?
Yeah, what's the lie here?
Yeah, I love that. That kind of reminds me, I interviewed somebody once who said in his coaching, it always started, like as quickly as he could get there, was what's the attachment? Like, where are you stuck?
Yeah.
It's kind of, and often I think it's a lie. But let me keep going on this, because what we're talking about is that an effective coaching conversation is not just a friendly conversation. There's an intention, there's a direction.
Yes.
Right. I believe that the most effective coaching is co-equal. It's a co-created.
I like that.
You're not the guru, you're not the sage. You're another human being in this conversation with somebody. You're there. I believe you'll be most effective when that's a service orientation.
Yes.
Right. Generous listening. You're holding space. Right. You're listening to your intuition, like all this. But then where this leads me, when we come back to commitment, right, is I like to end my coaching conversations with three things. One is, I love Michael Bungay Staniers. This is the last thing I'll do. His question of what was most valuable for you here today. Right. So that's for me the very last thing. And that provides that opportunity for reflection and realization, plus it usually ends on a high note, which is valuable, right? We know the peak end theory, the most intense and the last part of any experience is what gets remembered.
So true.
So why not do yourself a favor as a coach and just help the client remember what was most valuable for you here today? They hang up the phone or the Zoom or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, that was really valuable, right? But that was one thing. The other is I like to ask just to confirm. I actually don't like to get into scheduling. That can become a long thing, right? And most of my coaching engagements are multi-month. So we have a structure already. But just to confirm, hey, our next conversation is going to be, I have us scheduled for this, right? And in that way, that structure, that's the overarching thing here, is in holding space, not just in any single conversation, but in the relationship, right? So that's the second thing in reverse order. But the one before that is, would you be willing to make a commitment around this, whatever this was, right? And inviting that client to reflect on, is there something that they're willing to do, a conversation they're willing to have, or some action they're willing to take, or something they're willing to stop doing between now and the next time you talk, or now and another date. But that power of a commitment, of committed action, is what changes lives, right? So I've gone on a little long and there's more I want to say, but what are you thinking?
It's good. It makes me think of we're training our client of what is the experience to be coached by us.
Right.
So I'm going to go back to you talking about going to the movie theater. When you sit down, what do you know is going to be the first thing that's going to happen after you sit down?
Usually there's going to be some really loud sound because the previews are at a higher volume.
Previews are first, and higher because people are chatting.
Yeah.
Lights are still up a little bit. They come down, but they're still there.
Yep.
Then what happens?
Well, then like after the previews and then the film starts?
Yep. And typically the screen widens a little more.
Yep.
It gets darker. Maybe they remind you, phone's off, like for real this time.
Yep.
Yeah, you get it. And then at the end, soft lighting, credits roll.
Right.
But if you go see a Marvel movie, do you leave when the credits are rolling?
Not usually.
No, because we've been trained.
Yeah. There's a little something extra.
There's something coming.
Yeah.
As a coach brand, I do the same thing. I start every coaching session the same way, and they know it.
Yeah.
Now, the first time they don't know, so we design some of that. So at the end, to what I like where you're going, we design Bridgepoint coaching off this quote, Samuel Johnson, that we need to be reminded more than we're instructed. So the first question I ask at the end is, so what were you reminded of? Because I built my whole coaching system on being reminded.
Yeah.
Then I ask, what's become more clear? Sometimes that's not the same answer. Then I ask, well, for a commitment from them. And then I've added a question because I've been listening to you. And my last question is, what's been most meaningful? Because I do mostly corporate coaching, the first three answers tend to be a professional answer. When I ask what was most meaningful, I'm hearing more of the human being in them in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's just been an addition here in 2023.
Beautiful.
With that final question.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, when I talked in the info diet part of this conversation, the thing that I had taken, one of the things I had taken from this book, Games People Play by Eric
so
Berne.
here we are. The tease is back.
Yeah, the transactional analysis. It's this idea that in every moment, each of us is in one of three personas. We're either in an adult persona, we're in a parent persona, or we're in a child persona.
Okay.
Right? And if we're in a conversation or some other interaction with another person, they also are in an adult, a parent, or a child. And how well that works depends on where we are in those.
Interesting.
Right? I think it's quite fascinating.
Yeah.
What I wanted to talk about this conversation is Eric Berne introduces this idea of structure hunger. Right? And what he says is, look, he talks about our need for like acknowledgement, of affirmation, of physical affection from the time we're born, from the time we're born, right? That he refers to it as stroking, that we know, from science that's been studies that have been done, that children that aren't held, that aren't talked to, that aren't paid attention to, right? You talked about this with the mothers.
Yes,
and the phone,
exactly right. It's exactly right.
Right? Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah. So in the 60s, they were doing some research because it was the 60s. I can only imagine what inspired some of the research. But nonetheless, so when a mom's breastfeeding a baby, and there's a lot of eye contact there, and we just know bonding is happening. And so the baby's responding and cooing and those different things. So the researchers asked the mom to break eye contact with the child. So look away, mom. Couple seconds. 1, 2, 3. All right, now mom, now look back. Make eye contact, but you're still in the face. So you're not connecting. You're looking at them, but you're not connecting. You're not happy. You're not sad. And they want to know, what would the newborn do? And it was very disturbing to the newborn. And eventually the newborn would just let it go, but would be agitated. Didn't quite know what to do with that. This Apple phone came out in 2007. 2007 now to 2023. This study now has been gone large scale because now mom's breastfeeding the baby, not just this one time, but over the course of a year possibly. And she's on her smartphone. And so there's no eye contact. There's no bonding. And so what's happening with this kid over those first 2 years, and it's frightening to see what's happening in its correlation to chronic diseases and mental health issues.
Yeah, this is exactly, I think, what Eric Berne is touching on. Is he'll call it stroking, that happens physically, but it also happens mentally and emotionally. And he'll say that any interaction between human beings is, in some levels, it's a transaction. And if you say hi.
That's interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And others say hi. And his term for that is it's a stroke. I acknowledge you.
Okay.
Right? And he'll say, like, the quality and the smoothness of interactions is that people's strokes are equivalent, right? So if I say, like, hi, Dean, you look great today. That was probably 2 strokes because I acknowledged you by hi, maybe 3, I used your name, I gave you a compliment. Right? And if over time you don't reciprocate, right, then that will deteriorate. It tends to deteriorate my experience of a relationship because, I'm always giving. I'm, right? And I get also, I'm hearing my own self-talk that I think we want to reduce something as complex as human interaction to a formula, and it's not necessarily that simple. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of wisdom in this. And when you see that sometimes we're parenting someone, and if they don't want to be parented, right, then that can lead to conflict. Or if we're childish when someone's in their adult mode, that can also, right? But the point where I'm trying to go with this in the structure hunger is he'll say after that affection, after the stroking, so to speak, happens, what we're ultimately looking for is structure, right? What do I say after I've said hi, after we've traded strokes?
Right.
And now it's like, I love the description. He said, aren't the walls perpendicular tonight? Right? Like we're looking for something. And as a side note, I think this is why I've loved games for as long as I can remember, is that it's a built-in structure for human beings, and coaching provides that same thing. There's a goal, there's roles, there's rules, right?
Right.
That kind of thing. But I'm bringing this back to this about helping our clients, helping to be a great coach, helping our clients to achieve their results, have the experience of life they want, is when we recognize that humans do have an innate structure hunger, and we can help satisfy that through doing things like asking,
good.
When are we going to talk again next?
Yes.
Will you make a commitment between now and then, or whatever?
Yes.
That we're helping to meet a deep human need.
I like your focus, and I keep running away from it, and you keep bringing me back to it. I'm thinking just an overall commitment to the structure, but you're really shining the light on the last part of the commitment of when will we meet again?
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to get my attention to?
Well, yeah. I mean, it says Viktor Frankl, right, in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. I think his statement is it's a peculiarity of man that he can only live looking to the future, right? I mean, we can reminisce and ruminate and all that, but it's not a recipe for satisfaction. And we know that people without a reason to live shorter lifespans and probably less fulfilling lives.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, so now you're really reminding me of this. I remember going through my ICF training, and they talk about the true value of coaching is not in the coaching moment. It's in the space between this coaching session and the next coaching session. Did they give you the same Kool-Aid to drink?
I don't remember that.
And it makes sense, right? Because I may just have 15 minutes or I have 60 minutes with you.
Yeah.
But now there's 28 days, there's 30 more days that have to happen.
Yeah.
That's where the value is going to be.
Sure.
And so the ICF, good coach training will tell you, now when you meet back with the client, don't assume they are where you left them.
Right.
They shouldn't be if you're doing this coaching thing, right?
Yeah.
So it needs to start with, so where are you now?
Right.
And I really like that. And so back to this brand expectation, my clients know that. Now I have some clients that like the fact that this is not about small talk.
Mm-hmm.
So when they come on the Zoom call or we're live, this isn't how are the kids and how's the weather and what'd you do this weekend. They don't like it. They're not good at it. They just want to get down to business. But I also have other clients that they need that. They need that transition time. Yeah. Because they've just come through who knows what. And that's a good reminder too of a commitment to how are you doing? Especially for those who are doing just pure corporate coaching. I don't know if you just got your butt chewed for the last hour and a half by somebody, and now you're coming into this, and I'm expecting you to be vulnerable and transparent and hopeful and future thinking, and you're still licking your wounds. Yeah. So to allow for that transition to, are you ready to be in the coaching space?
Yeah.
There's probably some work for me to go and do and look at our process of our next coaching sessions are scheduled. Always. And we try to get them, we do 2-year contracts minimum, and we go ahead and schedule out the entire 2 years. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of these guys will flex on it, but it's already scheduled. Yeah. So they know that's going to happen and they know the process. But I think there's some things that we can do to add to this structure hunger. That's really fascinating.
Yeah. Interesting, huh?
Remind us, like, where do we find that? Is that a book?
So, yeah, it's a book that was, I think it was written in if it wasn't the 70s, it was the 80s.
So maybe we can put a link below to the Amazon or something. Yeah. Yeah, great.
I think it sold like 5 million copies. So there was a time when it was especially like in therapy and self-help circles, it was kind of a big thing. Okay, let's talk about our last subject.
Okay.
Our last subject is something that can help coaches to earn recognition and money. And what I want to talk with you about today is about Substack and about newsletters, if that's the right term, and about writing as a way of demonstrating your thought leadership, developing your ideas, serving others, because I know this is something you've been doing recently. So tell me about that.
Yeah, it sounds just so easy and so obvious. Newsletter's a new concept. In the 17 years that Bridgepoint's been around, we've never done a newsletter. I've been curious about the longer form because LinkedIn doesn't really, I put long form on there and people don't read it. I mean, they don't even like it. They don't have even the effort to hit the thumbs up button. So that wasn't the right format to do that. Substack, let me go this way. People that I admire, respect, and they're successful are in the newsletter game again. A lot of them were doing this in the 80s. I mean, that really was the communication way to do it then. So I'm watching them, and it's okay. So last episode, you challenged me to a creative brief. I'd already started the newsletter, but then my business partner and I then went through a creative brief just to kind of see where we were on it. So we're still kind of A/B testing the content we're putting on Substack as a newsletter, but then LinkedIn also has its own newsletter type form. Oh, did you know that?
No.
Yeah, so you can do a post, but then you could also do a newsletter on LinkedIn. Now, some of our listeners may know how to link those two things together. I don't know. So I do one in Substack, and then I do the same one on LinkedIn. As a newsletter, they're named the same thing. They look the same, but they're two different platforms. And so I'm trying to see what gets engaged with more. At this point, LinkedIn is winning.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know why. I've got some theories, but I don't really know why. But the content is, here's what I'm finding. Feedback I'm getting from clients that will use some of my content. If it was just on LinkedIn, there's a perceived value of the content. If they were to tell their team, hey, I saw this on LinkedIn, as opposed to, I was reading this in a newsletter. I don't know why we have perceived value on different mediums.
Oh, this is Marshall McLuhan, the great communications theorist, that the medium is the message. So where you read it, whether it's printed or digital, like all that is part of the communication.
That makes sense to me, because if I read something on Reddit versus I read it in the New Yorker,
it's different.
But it was the same thing.
It's different.
You're going to listen with a higher level of intentionality or perceived credibility. So that's where I'm already seeing a difference of I will get a text message or I'll have a coaching session and they'll say, hey, the article you had in your newsletter, I brought that to my team. We brought that to our board. I don't think they would have printed out my LinkedIn post.
Yeah. What are your goals for your newsletter?
Boy, that's a great question. One of them, we just have content. They're just things that we think about that we know would add value. Well, another thought I saw probably this weekend. I saw this on Twitter, and someone made a point. If you already have a lot of content that you've written in things like Medium or just other blog posts, you don't need to go create new content. Take that content, maybe update it for relevancy or it's more timely, and put it in a newsletter form. It will be received probably better than it was the first time. And you just saved yourself a bunch of time.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's a great challenge.
Yeah.
I want to go back and pick some of my favorite things that either I or some of my team have written over the last 17 years. Yeah. Repurpose that for a newsletter. So one of them is we talk a lot about this brilliant of two things that have to be possible to be a great coach and to make money. First, you have to be competent.
Yep.
And then second, you have to be known as competent.
Right.
The goal of the newsletter is to help us be known as competent.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. To demonstrate the thought leadership that we have, right, and ultimately have people know, like, and trust us, right? Because without that, it's like how do you pick a realtor, right? It's always word of mouth, someone you know.
That's exactly right.
Right? Coaches are really a lot the same way. I mean, you might Google somebody, but if you're not seeing something that's giving you that's endowing them with credibility and affinity,
right?
Why would they pick you? Why would they ever pick you? You know?
Yeah, you're trying to just increase the probability or your chance for luck.
Yeah.
In one sense.
Yeah. And I like this idea that if you can develop your ideas, you can serve others, right? Because this can maybe be a little bit of a grandiose thought, but this will outlive us. You know, the things we do, they matter more than the span of time they occupy in our lifetime.
Right.
Right. You can write something and, you know, who knows what will happen in the future on this planet.
Yeah, Mark Ryder. So a couple of thoughts on this, especially for those you're not a writer. I don't consider myself a writer, but Mark Ryder, so using the word writer a lot here, but Reiter, co-wrote all these New York bestsellers with Marshall Goldsmith. He will say that great writing is a result of great thinking. And I really like that.
Yeah.
But then there's grammar. So I might have good thinking.
Yeah.
They've been good in English there. Great thinking. I've sat with it. I've done my research. But where does the comma go? Do I have the right transfer? I'm looking at the camera here. Invest in things like Grammarly. It'll boost your confidence. Because one, it's in real time. It'll start giving you suggestions. I'm a slow learner, but you keep showing me the same thing over and over again. I get it.
Yeah.
And then it'll give you reports of how many corrections does it make. I got good news. It's correcting less of mine over the last 2 years that I've been writing more intentionally. And then use AI to help you get started. So I will put into, so whether it's Google Barts or Chat GPT, here's my thoughts. Help create my outline based on these things that I've been thinking about. And we'll put it in somewhat of a logical order that I don't have that ability. Now from that outline, now I start writing. And Grammarly is like, comma, goes here, thank you. Oh, this should be a new sentence, thank you. And then it increases my confidence to hit publish.
Sure.
Because if you take me back 5 years ago, Brilliant, I had all kinds of ideas. I just lacked the confidence to put it out there because I was convinced that everyone would be laughing at me. Seriously.
Oh. And how's it been?
If you're laughing at me, please don't tell me. I feel, well, it's been really fantastic. And I've been getting a lot of feedback of how are you doing this? How are you, did you hire somebody? Is someone creating this for you? And it's what I'm encouraging them is you have as many thoughts as I do. Yeah. I'm using some new tools to help me organize them. And then I'm using tools to help me with the grammar structure so that it's good. It's not a distraction.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And the last thing that I want to touch on in this part of the conversation is this idea that although something like a newsletter, we could go, oh, that's outmoded, or nobody does that anymore, which we know isn't true. A lot of people do.
Yes, they do.
Two thoughts. One is that, the algorithms on all these social media platforms will change forever.
So true.
And on those, like we might be connected with the people that we're connected with, but we don't own that relationship, right?
Right.
Facebook does or LinkedIn does. But when you have an email list,
yes,
you have a direct connection with that person, and nobody's going to change that algorithm. Email delivery and so forth is a different matter, but if they know you, they like you, they trust you, they want to hear from you, that's a huge leg up. The other thing I'm thinking about, Tucker Max, who wrote a book, became a New York Times bestseller, and he talked about part of his effort was to build relationships, to deliver value to people before he ever tried to sell them anything by sharing his writing regularly. And then when he launched his book, I think he sold 5,000 or 10,000 copies, which is a lot of copies.
It is.
To people on his email list. It's pretty amazing. So just wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard about this well over a decade of the wisdom of building out a mail list. On a scale of 1 to 10 of doing my best, I'm going to give myself a 3. I've got some hangups on that. Of spam mail, I've got my own internal dialogue of what I don't like about it, but I'm getting closer to when there is a genuine relationship that's formed and value, the strokes that are going back and forth. There's something about building your own email list versus go and buying one.
Sure.
And that's the difference. This is a good challenge for me.
Yeah. Well, and to keep it relationship oriented and not
Right.
just transactional.
Right.
That you're not trying to exploit this or maximize it per se. If it's coming from a place of service orientation or generosity or just sharing or self-expression, that's different from, well, let me see how I can monetize every name on my list.
Right.
Right. So, well, I appreciate you sharing with me what your experience has been. And as we continue this podcast over the subsequent months, I'd love to see what we can do to raise that from a 3 to at least a 4, Dean.
I think I can do that. I think just by even talking about it gets me to a 4. What I like the difference of, I can start doing my best right away.
Sure.
Now the outcome, that's the part you have to be patient with.
Yeah.
And that's where I can, when I started the Substack, you asked me, right from the very beginning, how's it going?
Yeah.
And as I reflect, I thought my answer was telling, because I didn't talk about content and I didn't talk about all these other aspects that I've been learning. I gave you how many subscribers I have. So I think it was after the first month and a half, we had almost 1,000 subscribers. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
And I've got those email addresses now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think it was, I had a golf lesson recently, and I think it was the instructor who said, we control starting, stopping, and trying, but we don't control the result.
So true.
So
True.
That's probably relevant for building a list as well. Or
you just got to
people.
start, right? Just got to start.
That's right. Okay. Well, Dean, thank you for joining me for another episode. It's been fun to be here together with you in person.
Yeah, it's so true. And looking forward to our golf game tomorrow and doing push-ups. And by push-ups, you're doing them.
You think so? What final words do you want to leave people listening and watching with?
2 C's come to my mind. I like the reminder of the commitment of when are we going to reconnect together as a client or as a coach to a client. I think there's a commitment to what's your brand of what is your process of being coach? How do you start? What's your middle? And how do you end? And then I'm also just thinking about this, listening to myself. Find your confidence and find tools to increase your confidence so you can put yourself out there so people can find you. But it's intimidating when you're all alone creating this content and to hit that big publish button.
Yeah. Yeah,
it intimidated me. It still intimidates me.
Yeah. Well, you're doing it.
I am indeed. So what about you? Last thoughts?
My thoughts are about how we each know what's right for us. I think it's not always easy to discern, but we know. And what's connected closely to that for me, it is the power of sleep. And this is something I heard in a conversation with Deepak Chopra, where he said that dynamic activity is a function of deep rest, and deep rest is a function of dynamic activity. And I just think about, maybe I'm not getting as much deep rest as I could or I want to, but my sense in connecting those is I think it's easier to know our truth or to have the courage to follow it when we are rested. It's not the obvious place to go,
right?
But I think that's what comes up for me as like last words. So just an admonition, an encouragement for anybody listening to get some rest.
I can give a 10 on that one.
All right.
Best effort for sure.
Okay. Well, Dean, we'll talk again in a couple weeks.
All right. Thanks for bringing it.
Thank you.